This morning we're at one of the most famous carpet factories in the world. It's Wilton Carpet Factory. I'd like to introduce you to the managing director of Wilton Carpets. It's Peter LeCount. Peter, good morning. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
Thanks for inviting us in today to have a look around your factory.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's always good to see people coming.
We're looking forward to this, I can tell you. How long has this factory actually been on this site now?
Well, of course, weaving has been going on in the town of Wilton for many, many centuries, and we trace our roots back to 1699 when William III gave a charter to the town. On this site itself, I believe the first weaving activity began in the early 1700s. And indeed, we have some of the buildings in the wonderful courtyard here that date back to before 1700, but I think they only began weaving in the early 1700s.
It's a long, long history, isn't it? A lot of workers must have gone through this place.
Well, I should think many, many, many thousands. And certainly, as a carpet factory, we're the oldest carpet factory in the UK. And in fact, we're the 17th oldest company in the UK altogether.
The 17th oldest?
17th oldest, and one of our very close compatriots is Twining Tees of Andover. I can't remember whether the 16th or the 18th, but they're one side of us.
There's the link. We've already been around Twinings with Sam Twining. How long have you been working here yourself?
Oh, I'm an absolute new boy. I only joined this time 1991, so I'm a 4-year service person. Nothing compared to those who've worked for generations in here. We are indeed in the team that we have now. We have many who are 4th or 5th generation employees. Of
course, in Wilton, then, it's the main places are the Wilton Carpets and the Wilton House. Have you got a tie-up with Wilton House at all?
We don't have a direct tie-up, but obviously the work that we do in both manufacturing and tourism link in very well with their use of our carpets and also their own tourist activities. So we have a pretty good relationship.
Do you have a tour that goes on here that we're going to see now? Then they go over to Wilton House.
We haven't at the moment started a completely integrated joint tour, but we do market together. And certainly there are various groups who come up, Women's Institute groups, Rotarian groups, and various sort of travel groups come in, and they spend half the day in Wilton House and half the day here at the factory.
It's a good way to spend a day. There was a management buyout here not too long ago. How long ago was that it happened?
Well, a new company was started on April the 11th here. The former business was sold by its parent company, and the entire business and the previous brand name, Wilton Royal, is now owned by an American multinational. Basically, the American multinational had no interest in the factory here, nor the centuries of skills that were vested in the local community. And we formed a new company to build on those skills and to build on the site.
It must have been devastating for all the people who worked here when it actually closed, because you did close the gates for a while, didn't you?
Very much so. Everybody, including myself, were put out of work. And I have to say, one of the most difficult tasks I ever undertook was to make that announcement back in January this year that the factory was to be closed. And I think the shock on everybody's face for several hours after that announcement demonstrated the depth of feeling.
So it was closed for how long before you managed to get the gates open again?
Well, weaving actually ceased here in early March. The site was closed down by the Americans who'd taken control of it on the 31st of March. We had hoped to open the gates with our new company on the 1st of April, but with lawyers being what they are, it took us 11 days more to get various bits and pieces signed off. So we actually started on the 11th of April.
So you re-employed the staff that were laid off at that time?
Well, we would have loved to have re-employed them all, yeah. But there were 140 people based here at the time the previous organisation closed. We began with 12 employees, and we've been steadily growing over the last 3 months, and we now have 44 employees.
Oh, that's excellent. Do you envisage expanding your horizons all the time and getting more employees back in here?
Well, we'd love to build back to the sort of level that we're here in January.
Because of the wonderful name the factory has got, obviously it's going to happen. I'm being optimistic.
With a great deal of hard work. Yes. I think something that does need to be recognised is that this is a fairly small carpet factory, and it cannot compete in the mainstream of the carpet industry. Carpets, like everything else, is becoming a global business, and you need to have enormous, great big factories with robots and the latest high-tech machinery to produce carpet at the very lowest cost if you're going to compete in the mainstream. So I guess in the car analogy, we can't go and fight the Fords of the world, but we can certainly go and play with the Rolls-Royces and the TVRs, and that's where we'll go.
Well, indeed, because a lot of your carpets that you do here, they're done to order, aren't they?
Yes, the new company will focus very much on bespoke custom design work, both for big institutions, banks, stately homes, hopefully royalty, but also for domestic consumers as well.
Peter, if I want to carpet my house like everybody else does, can we get them here?
Oh, very, very much so. Obviously, we have centuries of tradition and expertise here. And as well as making very special carpets for some very wealthy people, we are manufacturing carpets that are wonderful quality and very excellent value for everybody's home. And we're also using our skills to bring in some other quality products that are made elsewhere and marketing them through the site here and under our brand. So very much a place to come for carpets.
Terrific surroundings, lovely flowers. And we got Kaye Lawrence. How are you, Kaye?
Fine, thank you.
Kaye is going to take us around and show us what happens in Wilton Carpet Factory. Where are we going to start? In the museum?
We're going to start in the museum, if that's all right with you.
Excellent. So we'll... you want to follow us?
Yep.
Have these gardens always been here? Is this a new addition?
No, I mean, this is the last 50 or so years, I suppose, but especially the last 20, 25.
They're very well kept, aren't they?
Yes, we have a very good gardener, and he keeps it all looking lovely. It's an 18th century courtyard, so very special.
We've been out to the coffee shop, which is very good as well, and some lovely food in there.
Yes, very nice food, good coffee. Now we're going in here, and this is our resident duck. She's got a duckling. I don't know where the duckling is at the moment, but...
We'll find it.
We'll find it.
Right, we're in the museum.
We're standing now in one of the old hand-weaving sheds here. And we stopped hand-weaving 1958. Not really so very long ago.
It's not, no.
The last carpet we wove is in the chancel of Guildford Cathedral, and we finished it in 1958 when hand-weaving finished here. It took about 9, 10 or so weavers sitting side by side, like you see in that photograph, hopefully working at roughly the same pace. That's a modern design for a modern cathedral.
How long did it take to weave that?
2 whole years.
Good Lord.
This shed, if I can call it that, was filled with hand-woven samples because we always wove a small piece so that you could see what you were going to get.
Yeah.
If you were going to wait a long time, it's nice to know you were going to like it at the end of it.
For 2 years, you might
That's
have gone
right.
off the idea.
So when we were closed down before, the samples were sent away to various museums. So what you see on the walls here are not even hand-woven. We've got 2 Wiltons and a piece of Axminster here. Now, I should tell you straight away that we weave both Wilton and Axminster carpets here. We started weaving Axminster just about 100 years ago when they had a fire in the factory there in Devon and went out of business. Many of the looms and the weavers came here.
Is there a great deal of difference in the weave?
Before you leave, I hope you'll be able to see the difference.
Excellent.
This was actually woven for Bovis homes.
Yes. Yeah,
Most of what we're doing now is contract work.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what we're standing on was actually is not woven at all. This was a carpet that was made at our Rumsey factory.
Which is now closed.
Which is now closed, sadly. Now, this is called the tuft cutting gig. With all the clamps up, I'll just move a few now. The tuft cutter would have taken a hank like this, which is 100% wool, and that is the texture for what we wove for 16 and 36 knots to a square inch. And they had to be cut into small pieces. So he would cut through the hank, lay it across here, and then just with a sharp knife, which he had to keep on sharpening, this looks very frightening, but I am in a good mood today. He would lean on the clamp with his left hand and cut through with his right, forming little tufts like that. And they're going to go in knot by knot. If you were wealthy and wanted a more expensive carpet, you might have a carpet woven in that texture, would you believe, for 64 and 100 knots to a square inch.
That would take an awful long time to do.
That was probably why they took about 2 years.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. A good hand weaver could do about 1.5 foot, or let's say just under 1/2 meter square a day, and that's working hard. They were always on piecework, and they did an 8-hour day. So it's called chain warping because they formed a chain or a plait in order to take the warp threads over to the loom there. As you see in the photograph, what she would do is to lash the ends on, let it run through, and get the right number and the right length for the quality of carpet that was going to be woven. This is linen thread, which they always used for warp threads. So they take the warp threads, tie them tightly onto this top beam here, and let them hang down over the rest. Across this one, which has got nails at every inch or every 2 centimeters. Well, the warp threads are hanging down here across this, and then they're kept in 2 rows by that little beam, joined together on this bar of the bottom beam, which has got some very sharp spikes in order to hold the work absolutely steady. While we're looking at this, this is the pattern that they worked from. If you look at the wall over there, you can see the design which the artist would have, or designer would have designed. Lovely pictures, if you like, in watercolours. And then other artists, that I'm inclined to call hack artists, would translate those onto strip after strip of squared paper, because, for the weavers, each square represented 1 knot. And so they would start at the bottom left-hand corner, work their way along and up, and then when that was finished, it was replaced by another one. It wouldn't have had a red knob, but each weaver had a pin, because she daren't take her eyes off that in case she lost her place.
Oh, I see.
If she lost her place, she'd lose money because she had to unpick. They were paid for every 1,000 or so knots that were right.
Yeah.
Right, now I'll show you how they did the hand weaving. This is for 16 or 36 knots. We've got, for each nail here, 4 threads in the front and 4 in the back, because this is going to be 16 knots to a square inch. I won't follow the pattern because you might be here all day. Right, you tie the tuft around the front warp thread, pick up the back one that belongs to it, tie the other end round that, pull the ends together and pull down. Can you imagine doing that for 8 hours, day after day after day?
Fingers must get fairly sore.
Well, they obviously got hardened, I
Yeah.
think. No, that's going to be the wrong one. If you've done it wrong, if you make a mistake at this stage, it's easy enough to get it up. Look, there's nothing to hold that in, so I can pull it out. So that's when they need to notice a mistake. Well, now we'll pretend we've done a whole row according to the pattern, and then we take the weft. It's the weft which locks the knots in. I'll put my hand just behind the front row of warp threads and take the weft needle behind. Now you imagine it's going all the way along, and then it's beaten down with this heavy, very heavy hand fork. I took an old lady round the other day and she said, "I miss the noise in here." Noise, I thought, in a hand weaving shed. Well, we used to sing and talk to each other, and we were banging, and this was the banging. Not too much for 16, but much more if you were doing a better quality carpet.
Yeah.
All right, well, now we pretend we've gone all the way along that way, and we come back, pulling these, which are called leashes, attached to the back warp threads. I'm pulling that right through the front and going behind the back. And then you beat that down. Now you will have then 2 rows of weft. When you've got your next row of knots on the top there is nothing that will pull them out.
Yeah.
They're there forever. And I'll leave that there for the moment. Then you would do an edging, not in bright green, of course, but this is just to show the visitors who might be on the far side of the bar. A figure of 8 around the first 2 and the last 2 warp threads, which you push down hard to make a good edge so that when it comes off the loom, they stay together.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, for the more expensive carpet, you would do this. Once again, I'm working, it doesn't really matter where. You could have also a shaped carpet. Now, I'm starting work here in the middle. When we come through the museum again, you might like to look at some of the photographs which show you that you could have a shaped carpet as well as oblong, square, round, or whatever,
Yeah.
which some people wanted, believe it or not. Before I came here, I did a bit of research, and I found that carpets were woven by hand, you could see on Egyptian murals 3,000 years before Christ.
Yeah.
It's a very, very old craft. And of course you had your weft, you beat it down very hard till you got 64 or 100, and then with these scissors, which a visitor the other day called dog-leg scissors, you can chop off the loops. And that's how that was formed.
Okay, this is the beam loom.
This is called a beam loom, yes, because of the beam of yarn that's up there. Now you could see that you could have any design you liked on the previous loom we've just looked at. If you've got a photograph, if you get it onto those squares, you could get it onto the floor. But this is only multicolored, plain, or our curator has knotted in red so that we could show you we have a border.
Right.
We like to use this to demonstrate because it leads into the Wilton kind of weaving, which is different from Axminster. So in those days, they would insert a wire which has got a groove that I'm running my thumbnail up and down. That was inserted under the wool threads, at the end, of course. If you were lucky, you had someone to stuff it in for you. The weaver, incidentally, would be sitting here, really. I've changed the pedals now, and up have come the warp threads. Now that's jute, coming from down below. You'd throw your weft, left and right, you'd release the catch and beat it together, and then with a sharp knife cut through to the groove of the first wire. That would release it, so on you would go again.
Oh, I see.
Yes. Well, I have to admit I might find that a little tedious. But we use this demonstration to lead into the Wilton kind of weaving. Because when you're standing by a Wilton loom, the noise is intense, although the weaver will explain it again for you. But there they have wires like this. Now that indicates the depth of the pile you'd get. Here, in this head, the weaver's inserted a very sharp little triangular blade, which he has to change about every 9 or 10 days, perhaps. He's got about 30 of these in front of him, but much closer together than these.
Yeah.
Okay, he sets it up, gets the wool over the wires with the help of the loom. Then when he's ready to weave, he'll press the button, and the first one here will zip through the loops, cutting as it goes.
Oh, I see.
Then it's knocked back, automatically it re-enters behind, while the next one goes across, and it's very fast. So I say to the children when I'm taking them round, it looks like a little mouse zipping across.
How long ago was this in use?
This particular one, well, it says 1655 right up to 1936, would you believe? Yes. During the war, we made camouflage. Of course, no carpets were being woven, and we washed army blankets and tents and things like that here. Back to the Wilton loom now. If you're not having a cut pile Wilton, you might like a looped pile. Now, this is a wire. They're all called wires. He's got about 30 of these ranged in front of him, and that simply zips through the loops and doesn't cut. So you're left with effect rather like tapestry.
Oh, right. Yes.
Very nice. They say even a determined cat can't lift those. I don't know. Well, ours hasn't yet. Right. Let's move on. When they stopped the tours in 1989, all the samples were sent away to museums, and the museums are reluctant to part with them, of course. But we have 2 left. Now, this beautiful one was 64 knots to a square inch. And I like to show people the back because it's almost as lovely at the back as it is in the front.
It is indeed.
Now, if you'd like to feel that, and wouldn't you like to get out of bed and put your feet on that in the morning?
Oh, it's a lovely pile in that.
A lovely pile in that. This one is 36 knots. It's a much heavier. This is the Tuft by Tuft, which you saw me doing first.
Yes.
And that's a much more robust carpet, I suppose. I can hardly lift this, but we've got a photograph on the wall over there of that 27 porters were needed to move one of the carpets. It was
27?
27. It went to the Carlton Club. I hope that they were able to get on a train or something because it's a long way to walk. But you can see the courtyard in that photograph where every carpet was laid out to get it into shape or whatever, and then rolled up and taken. Where you got your tickets for the tour, the showroom, that was open to the road. This hand weaving was so popular at one time that we had a shed, various villages around Wilton, and their work was brought in through there from the road. Wouldn't work now, of course.
No, indeed.
Last in here is a shearing machine. Even that isn't a piece of hand-woven, but it is a piece of Wilton. Now, these shearing machines were invented in America and gave rise to the lawnmower.
Oh, right.
I'm sure some of you can remember pushing along this thing with the revolving blade. So these revolved against this. If you looked at what I was doing at the loom, it might have looked a bit rough, because the weavers hadn't got time to get every single knot exactly the same. They'd never have finished.
No, of course.
So they got them in as well as they could, and then it came to the shearer. Actually, we used one like you see in this photograph on the wall here. And the other chap's got an old bizen broom that he's sweeping the excess pile off.
Right.
And this was 100% wool, so it could go on the land.
Yeah.
Nowadays, we mostly use in the factory 80% wool, 20% nylon, known as 80-20.
Right.
Because we find the 20% nylon just gives a bit of extra oomph, if you like.
Makes it stronger, I suppose.
Well, yes. Wool and cotton are lovely things, but they've got a certain amount of, how shall I say, movement, if you like,
Yeah.
whereas just that bit of nylon keeps it a bit in shape.
Right, what's in here then?
Well, this is a browsing area, really. We explain a little bit about the carpet manufacture and what is here while we're in here, but really it's better, I think, for people to walk around and just browse at what they're interested in. But this is useful because I can tell you that by looking at the back of a carpet, you can tell the quality. Now, this one, for instance, is what we're standing on. That's the tufted range, which most people buy these days because it's slightly cheaper than a woven carpet. And there's no reason why, if it's a good manufacturer, it's not a good carpet. But you can see it's got Hessian backed. So this part of the carpet will be coming through big machines which have large sewing machine needles going up and down very fast in pre-woven cloth. That comes off a machine, then it goes through a huge plant where the Hessian is glued on.
Right.
Above it, that's an Axminster. Now, you can see here, there is your weft, which is jute. These are the warp threads, they're polypropylene, or poly for short, but you can't actually really see the wool coming through. I don't like to say just, but an Axminster is just a tuft of yarn.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas the Wilton, can you see straight away the difference? You can see the wool coming right through the yarn.
Yeah.
You've always got extra yarn coming into a Wilton, because when you get in the factory, you'll see the bobbins on the frames behind the looms. Everything that you see is going into a Wilton. And that is the looped pile. Do you see?
Yes.
We gave up dyeing, DYE, on site a couple of years ago because it was more economical to bring the yarn in already dyed. Our curators put this little tiny vat. They had vats here, the size of half this room. What they would do is wash the wool, put the hanks onto the steel rods in the lid. They'd fill, obviously, the vat with water and dye, absolutely precisely weighed and measured, chemical dye. Some of the shades you can see down there, and acid to fix it. Then they would lower the lid, lock it in, and put on the clock how long they wanted it to boil or cook for. And believe it or not, you can boil wool. You start from cold and you bring it up very, very slowly, and then it doesn't shrink. Right. Well, obviously it didn't shrink. It wouldn't have been economical if it shrunk at all, if every hank went to about half the size. They put on the clock, 6 hours approximately for this colour, and then lift up the lid. They would cut through several strands to make quite sure the colour was fully absorbed, and then it was ready to be dried and wound. Our designer very kindly did this illustration for us to lead into what you will see an Axminster loom doing. Now, this is a narrow Axminster. He's standing in front of those which are a row of these. These are called grippers. Now, they look just like birds' heads, birds' beaks, don't they? They're set to go up and down to the top line of wool, which is being presented to them by the action of the jacquards. Now, the jacquards are punched cards like you would see on a pianola, knitting machine, that kind of thing. And this is the beginning of the computer, absolutely. Now, the man who invented them died just over 100 years ago. Joseph Jacquard, Frenchman, and there we are, still using them. So, the top line of wool is always being changed. For the grippers to grip the wool, they pull it out, A cutter goes across, leaving each beak with a tuft, which it hangs onto, brings it down to the warp threads, which are busy going through each other, just like you saw me do at the hand loom.
Yeah.
The weft needle goes through, and there's your Axminster. This is a working model which shows you the jacquard system. Now, here, the jacquard is on the side. When you get in the factory, you'll see it's overhead, over the weaver's head. These needles are going into holes if they can, or if they find they can't, that will dictate what action the selectors have to take to lift the right wool, which you see being pulled down at the bottom, lifted up, ready to be cut. We're walking now across the River Wylye.
Yeah.
If you've ever wondered why there's a factory here, the reason is the river had the right kind of water for washing and dyeing of the wool. I'm talking about many years ago. Oh, yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Alkaline, soft,
Yeah.
you know. And Wilton, being an old established town, could produce the workforce.
Yeah.
And the sheep, or the wool, was on the backs of sheep very close on Salisbury Plain and on the downs and so on. So I expect they say the same in Kidderminster, but,
Yeah, indeed,
but you've
yes.
got to have those components all together. Up go the grippers. Grip the wool. Along goes the cutter. Down they come with each one with a tuft. To the warp threads. There goes the needle. The 4 shots of weft, beaten together. It breaks, makes the grippers break open so that they release the tuft, and then up they go for the next one.
And this is all set by the cards above it.
That's all, yes, managed by the cards. They come up against a cylinder up there, which has got spikes, you see?
Yeah.
And the spikes will go through the holes or not, as the case may be. You can see the wires which are lifting the right wool from the back there on the frames.
Fascinating. It's great to see it in slow motion as well.
You should have Tony explain this to you. Was that about right, Tony?
That's just right, I think. Grippers have got hold of the ends. Grippers have got hold of the ends, and the knife will come across now and cut it to the length required. The weft comes across on the needle, picked up on a small shuttle at the end. The reeds come in. The reeds are what keeps everything apart. Pushes the weft over the top of the gripper onto a comb, and then you'll hear the grippers burst, open ready for the next lash as they go up. When they get to the top, they close, pull away to the length required, and then the knife comes across. And that's the one lash.
This is a very expensive plant, and they don't actually have it working all the time. So when there's a great collection of carpets, they can then set it in motion. What they do here is to crudely, roughly, seam them together so that they move through in one movement. They get captured by a sort of prickly roller to get them absolutely straight. There's a brush roller going around rather like a Hoover brush. Then the back of the carpet slides over a roller which is being fed with sizing to make it sort of a little stiffer at the back. And then you see the steam blowing into the carpet to open up the tufts a bit. Then it goes through a great big rotary iron kind of movement to dry them. And finally over 2 shearing blades. And what they cut off is then sucked through those pipes and into plastic bags, which until recently was thrown away, but now it's used in the manufacture of paper.
Is it?
Yeah. Good, isn't it?
What's this one, Kaye?
This is a broad loom Axminster. Exactly the same principle as the narrow one, only bigger. This is the beaming department. Now what has to happen here is the beam, bobbin, of polypropylene or jute, which one of the Wilton beams has got to be on the right peg, threaded through the right hole along those battens that you can see, through the machine, through these sort of combs on there, and no thread must cross, otherwise it's not going to weave properly. And then they gather so many into a handful, make a knot, as you see all the way along there. And then the knots are pushed through the empty holes in the beams. This cut pile, and you can see the wire head just going across, cutting through the loops, making a pile as it goes. And each wire is automatically shoved in at the back while the next one goes across. The shuttle is being banged backwards and forwards 70 miles an hour. Kaye's flying shuttle, if you remember your history of years ago.
Sort of. It's so long ago.
So long ago, I'm afraid so, yes. Now we've got no pattern on this, so you won't see cards up above.
Right.
Because it's a plain carpet. But if you look at it, you can see the wool coming right through at the back. This is a sample of a corduroy effect that you could have. He would weave alternate rows, you see?
Oh, yes.
Why I like to show this to visitors is that you look at the back and you've got all these colours of wool going in. They don't appear on the front, but the customer got the density, the quality that they wanted without having to have this colour on the top. It just meant that the weaver wouldn't have to take all the wool off and put this green back on. He could leave some of the colours there already, which are just going in underneath. And after all, nobody looks at the back side of a carpet, do they? Right. Now we're going to go up to the picking line up here. The pickers are wonderful girls. They pick up mistakes, hence the name, I suppose. Most of the time they are actually putting tufts in where the machine has missed them. What might have happened, the bobbin might have run out, or there was a knot and it had gone through and done, come apart. So they're putting it together. So we'll go up and look at them.
Okay, thanks, Kaye.
They all have lights underneath, so that it throws into relief wherever there is a hole. And they've got a line there, so they've got to put in by hand with these big needles, loops, and then they cut them, and then you won't actually see, when it's all finished, that there's anything done at all.
So every carpet that leaves here goes through this process?
Every carpet that leaves here has to be perfect. So they have to go through this quality control afterwards to make sure that it is right. So it's woven, it's picked, it goes through the finishing, and then, if it's okay, out.
Right.
And they won't let it go out unless it is absolutely perfect.
So these girls have a tough job. They have to look.
These girls have a tough job, but they're happy, aren't
they
you?
seem
happy
very
in your
happy.
work? Happy in your work. Yes, they love it. There you are.
This is an older plant, this one.
This is going to be this is the older plant for winding wool onto bobbins. Normally, she's using the more modern, which is winding great big filled bobbins, but she only wants a little for this. Well, the previous lady who was working here called this machine Gilbert. Gilbert. Because she said, like the average man, it needed a lot of looking after. I pass. So this is obviously quicker than doing it by hand. But when we made that American carpet, for instance, Gilbert wasn't installed. But like most computers, it's a little bit more temperamental than a human being. For instance, mentioning that American carpet, that had 37,000 cards. We must have been doing a lot of tours recently because there isn't a plain card left. What we should be putting in here is plain pressed card, which slides in there. Here is the design. Now the ruler is placed along the bottom line there. Okay, now each square is going to be one hole on the carpet and one tuft. I shouldn't say one hole, should I? Each is going to be one hole on the card, meaning one tuft on the carpet. For these, they're called pegs. I'm not quite sure why, but each one has a head, and it's inserted into this steel, what would you call it? Plank, I suppose, a little plank. Anyway, on the card, the first square is that powder blue, which is number 6, each colour having a number in the key down below. So we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and drop the peg in. So 37,000 of those must have taken quite a little while.
Good Lord.
Right, that's how the cards are made. And then, of course, they take them into the next room, where we've just been, and with sort of treadle machines, they're seamed together in order. As she finishes each card, she writes a number and a letter and puts it in the appropriate slot on the table here, and then takes them in so that they go in order. And they have to be seamed exactly right. because if they're seamed too tightly or too loosely, they don't work around properly, and therefore the weaving is all thrown out. I've actually been in here when a weaver came in and said, this is no good, and the poor girl has had to unpick it all and do it by hand. That doesn't happen very often. The weaver's shop, where the carpets are sold at the moment, carpets that we have woven, carpets that we have bought in from other reputable manufacturers since we've been in business again. Yeah. Obviously, when we were Wilton Royal and had our Rumsey factory, we had carpets coming in from there. But now you can see these lovely handcrafted Chinese rugs.
Beautiful, aren't they?
Aren't they gorgeous? Each one is different. And the Persian rugs over there, again, each one is slightly different. And they're not really very expensive when you think of the hours of work that have gone in. You saw me slowly doing
Indeed.
that knotting hand by hand.
I'd never realised it would take that long to make a carpet.
It does take a long time if you're doing it by hand.
So hence the price, isn't it?
Hence the price. But I think the price is really very reasonable at the moment here. Clothes and bedding, towels, ends of lines, seconds, all very good prices.
Even gents' suits.
Even gents' suits, yes. Oh, you'd look very nice in that, Tony.
I wouldn't.
Look at that's all right.
Right, carpet showroom.
Carpet showroom, yes. This is just some old designs, just to show people what we have done in the past, and invite you to write your comments in the book about what you think of the tour, and return your badges.
Well, it will be excellent.
I took a small boy one once, and he said, I don't know what to write. So I said, what did you think of it? And he said, Brill. So I said, well, write Brill then. And he wrote Brill. And this has been very useful because the tours were stopped in about 1989 and eventually started again because somebody could go with the book to the then management and say, look, this is what people thought, this is what we're missing, and so we could show them.
It's such a famous place. It is great. And Kate, thanks very much for showing us around today. It was brilliant. It was brill.
Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure to take you around.
Thanks a lot.